Hi everyone, welcome to Martech Brain, a Netco initiative where we speak to the best brains in Martech and delve deep into one topic. My guest today is Sanjay Suri, Chief Technology and Product Officer at Nykaa. Sanjay has had a distinguished career working at Oracle, Amazon, Traders, and also an intermediate stint as an entrepreneur. He is an ultra runner and a triathlete. The chosen topic for our discussion today is building tech platforms as moats. So welcome to Martech Brain, Sanjay.
Thanks, Rajesh. It's a privilege to be here.
And would love to dig deep into it. So what do you mean when you say, how can technology platforms work as moats?
Okay, so let me start by saying that, fundamentally, the key question that comes before you get to that is what kind of a company are you? Are you someone who's tech-driven, engineering-led, and expecting to build strategic advantage there and build moats there around your platforms? Or are you equally strong, but more happy to buy best-of-breed solutions and stitch them together to get platforms working? Both work very well. There are global giants who have taken either strategy and been very successful. So let me actually just share my screen and run you through a quick presentation, which I am using to just explain all of my mental model.
And that'll be great. Go ahead, Sanjay. Yep.
Okay, so essentially, how do I think about this whole MarTech thing? And this is a case in point. It's more about building any platform, tech platform. But taking the example of MarTech, since that's more relevant here to the series. So if you look at, question is, what is MarTech? MarTech is coming together of the intersection of marketing and tech. People coming from very different mindsets. The marketing folks looking at, retargeting and acquisition and activation and increasing LTV and all of that. And quintessential techie looking at building cool tech and finding beauty in everything they build. So getting them together itself is a fun exercise. So let me jump into a survey that I found very insightful. It was done by chiefmartech.com. You should go check them out. So there's a little dated. I think they've updated it, and they have like 8,000 products now. So if you look at MarTech in general, it starts with advertising, the whole ad tech space, then content-based experience and commerce, social experience commerce, then the usual e-commerce funnel area, and then data visualization, MIS. And if you look at each of these buckets, there's a plethora of products. There's so many products that you will not even be able to go down more than 20 products in each of these buckets because there's so much happening. There's so many niche players. There are the global tech giants offering ERP grade solutions. And there are tons of niche players which you can't ignore either. So one of the biggest challenge for a CTO becomes, how do you make sense of this whole space? And what is it that you should really build? And how should you go about it? And you got to remember that there'll be a lot of your peers in marketing and elsewhere who will be asking you for tons of capabilities and who would have their favorite products from their past lives, right? Which they want to roll out. So how do you make sense of this? This is, I think, the key question. And this is where you got to go back and really look at your team's DNA. And in our case, really, we are engineering-led. We build tech platforms as strategic strength. And we have autonomous teams that are measured only on outcome. But essentially, we are all about building tech moats. That's my team. And so if you take a step back, you will see that, just to revisit what I'd said earlier, you would see there are two ways about it. One is you buy on the left, you buy an enterprise grade solution, and then you integrate multiple niche providers as needed, maybe few, but there are always some which the large enterprise products don't cater to. Or you build a proprietary yet very flexible platform but with a key design requirement. I wouldn't say design constraint, but a key design requirement that allows for very clean integrations with niche players. And that's the road less traveled, the road on the left, and that's how that aligns with our own DNA. So that's where my thinking goes, and that's what we have built. So clearly, we will build a proprietary platform that gives us a competitive advantage. And just to pick a few use cases to make it a little concrete, right? We've actually tried a lot of products, both from Indian companies and global companies, tech giants, from niche players and broad-based players that say we can do everything. And let's just run through these use cases quickly. Price drop campaign, how that's a pretty standard one. Notify me when you're out of stock. Cart abandonment with custom coupons, personalized gateway pages, all your personalization engine. Then data security concerns. How do you share data with someone without sharing PIIs and only give it to them through an API while sending out notifications? So if you look at some of these concrete use cases, and then we sort of implemented one or two products, but then they didn't succeed. So then we had to we lost time, and then we started building our own. So in my mind, what happened is we did give a fair chance and implemented some of these available products, but they didn't really work out very well for us. So then what did we do? We went out and built our own proprietary motherboard, so to say. So I'm using the motherboard of a computer as an analogy. So what does a motherboard do? It does some basic functions, but primarily it allows for cartridges, whether it's by way of a RAM or a CPU or a graphics card or something else. It allows for functional extensions to be done by third parties who choose to cater to work with your API interface, essentially, right? So that's what we have built. And think of a data platform, data gathering platform, a data sharing platform. On that, we have bolted our own NICA CPU, which gives us the capability to do real-time personalization and product recommendations. That's built into our platform. And then what do? Then we say that, okay, I have this whole API spec, because we see one of the most common use cases is we get a lot of players coming in and saying that, hey, use our product recommendation engine, your conversion will go up by 30% or 50%. So sometimes they make sense, and then the proposition is pretty strong, and we don't want to go out and build everything. So then we say that, fine, here's our API spec. This is how you get access to our data. It has no PIIs, so we're not risking any of our customer data and identity. And churn this data, give us product recommendations, we'll take them, we'll send them out. So that's how we've made our platform pretty extensible. And then if you look at here down below around peripherals, this is where we interface with the other third-party notification services, whether it's sending an app push or email or text or WhatsApp, whatever it is. And mind you, we're also able to use multiple providers for each and build redundancy. And what we also want to do is that the notification service gets the request to notify a user, and the user at that time is identified by user ID. If we need the email, if we need the phone number, or need any other identifier, which is a personal identifiable information, that is looked up at by the notification layer. So that's how we also protect our data. So, these are some of the main things, key highlights of what we have built. And it's not fully built, but that's the way we're going down. And this sort of summarizes also my mental model on how I think of building platforms in general. And hope, through this, I've been able to explain how we're looking at building our MarTech solution.
I think it's been fascinating, Sanjay. I think the motherboard example was spot on. So one question, if we dig a little deeper into this, would be that I think envisioning how this whole thing will look and work together, the architecture, I think that probably plays a very important role in this whole thing. So it's not, I mean, you got to sort of imagine how it will be, and then you're building it layer by layer.
Right. So let me explain how at least how I go through it, and hopefully that will hopefully that helps.
Mm-hmm.
So I think first of all, the key thing is, as a CTO, it's very hard to tell anyone that, listen, give me 6 months, I'll tell you what I'm going to build, or just slowing down business by a year or 6 months, because nothing reasonable, nothing non-trivial can be built in less than 6 months. Anything substantial can be built only over, I would say, 18 months, right? It just takes time. So first of all, you've got to not be in a hurry. First of all, you've got to douse the fire. What I mean by that is get some reasonable, buy some reasonable products and sort out your basic use cases, get your business as usual running. Don't have any fires. That's number one. Second, you've really got to think hard and decide whether is it in your team's DNA to build stuff, build frameworks and platforms, or you're better off buying versus building, right? So I'm assuming then let's say you've decided that, yes, I want to build stuff, right? Then what you got to do is you got to think hard about all the use cases, and then you've got to think of what are the key areas that you want to own, what are the risks that you want to protect from when integration happens. So in our case, the example of personal identified information. And then you've got to basically build this thing out. But always a very key design requirements, just to repeat, should be, what is my API interface, which will allow me to do third-party integration seamlessly, easily. I can generate documentation, so every integration is not another 6-month thing. So I think that's how I go about it.
Yeah, great learnings also, I think, for others who are embarking on this journey. I think the points you said essentially, that don't be in a hurry to do everything at once. I think stick to what's working. I think the DNA is very important. I think the sort of buy-in right from the top, that we are going to be a tech-driven company. I think that's, very critical. And then the third element is, of course, thinking through the architecture and the design, because that also means that you then have to hire in a certain way.
Absolutely.
And you've been managing a very large team, 200 people, I think, both in Mumbai, and a large team in Gurgaon. So how do you go about both in terms of how do you go about recruiting and in terms of managing? So what's your style? But this is very unique. I mean, the DNA that you're talking about of an engineering led in an e-commerce company is not easy to come by.
Yeah. So actually, sometimes when I talk so much about these things that people think, is he really the CTO? But the profound truth is that it's really all about hiring best talent, great leaders, and second, it's about having a great culture. I think these things are always told to us by everyone, but the fact is, this is it. Cliches are always the profound truths and profound learnings. So I think on team management, my philosophy is, first of all, we're talking about technology. So you should have a very, very, very clear idea of what you need to build. You need to have a very great understanding and definition of the architecture that you need to, your final architecture. From there, you've got to figure out, your hiring has to be very strong. You have to be able to hire very strong leaders. What that means is, in just two dimensions, they have to be very strong in their domain, whether it's product thinking, whether it's computer science and software development, large scale systems, full stack development, all of that, which I think is the easier one, right? So you've got to be very good at gauging that. And second, you need to hire people simply who can gain trust of their teams. So I think you need to nail these two. You need to have the architecture, and then you hire people. You assign, I'm talking about the leadership that you hire, and then you assign each person to a part of the architecture. No overlaps, mutually exclusive pieces, and collectively exhaustive from an architecture standpoint. And then you let them run with it. So actually, it's as simple as that. But if you do this, then you can run teams, distributed teams, geographically distributed teams. You could be in 3 locations. We're already in Bombay, which is where I'm based, and our larger team is in Gurgaon. It works beautifully. And now we have the confidence, since this model has worked so well, we're going to Bangalore for certain teams. So I think this has been my experience, and it just works very nicely.
And if I sort of ask you this question of how did you evolve your thinking? I think, was it your sort of stints at Oracle and Amazon, or how did this sort of thinking evolve? Because this is a very unique way, technology as a moat is something which you don't hear very often. Building the full stack, owning the full stack in a way, motherboard upwards.
Right.
Most of the tendency, I think you've seen also your peers, a lot of them, the tendency is to, sort of take different components, put them together.
Right.
And you've chosen a very different path. So how did you develop this thinking?
So I think I was deeply influenced from an architectural standpoint by my stint in Oracle in Redwood in the headquarters, and this was Oracle ATI, 20 years back. I was a young engineer, and I was in the. They had these fancy names, and the Oracle database had a data cartridge. Oracle database is something, it's a SQL relational database, and you put some data in tables and you join them in columns and you do some projection, and it's pretty simple. But they had built this thing that what if someone had their own algos to run joins, and they thought they knew their data best, therefore their algos would run best. So Oracle said that, okay, we'll build a data cartridge where we'll allow people to plug in their algorithms to run a database join, and the data would still be managed in the Oracle DB. So, it was just, and this is 20-25 years back. So, that's where I learned my architecture. And over the years, in the middle, you tend to forget, because then you go back to building some very specific applications. But then somewhere it stays, and then later in life, when you have a larger mandate and you're looking at those things again, then it just sort of all comes back. So I think that's been and then later at Amazon again had the same kind of thinking. Amazon influenced me by way of organizational, structuring, and their deep commitment to autonomous centers. So I think that's my org thinking came from there. My architecture thinking early years came from Oracle, and then along the way, learning from peers, that's been a great learning. And finally, there's one blog I'd like people to go back and read. I think it's by Werner Vogels, Amazon CTO. He talks about architecture-driven organizations. That's what I follow. And if you really think about it, you might say, yeah, that's pretty intuitive. And but then, you read it, it's a great blog. He says, if you define your organization and then tell them what to build, then your architecture will mimic the organization, because everyone will build what they think is best. But you should do your optimal architecture first, and then assign people to parts of the architecture, so they can't mess up the optimal architecture. At worst, they may mess up a part of the implementation.
I think, yeah, fascinating. I think when we were chatting, you also mentioned about this idea in terms of building teams of pods. I think that's another key component, really. When you say autonomous, you've got these different pods which work on.
One of the easiest things to do, and I don't mean to be critical, but it's a very pragmatic thing to do is to have separate UI teams, separate backend teams, separate web team, mobile team, right? That works very well. But I think what works even better is the pod model, where if someone owns search, let him own the full stack. Let him own Android, iOS, mobile, desktop, APIs, algorithms, infrastructure, DevOps. So then he's most motivated, he's most excited, he owns all the key metrics. Because search is one place where you can say that, like most things, you can say that the UI is not great, therefore conversion is not great, or the algo is not great. So let one person own everything, and then and actually, I would also encourage people to go watch a very famous video made by Spotify Engineering Culture. If you look by that, you'll find it. They have beautifully explained how the internal workings of a pod.
Great. I think these are wonderful inputs for anyone out there, I think, building engineering teams. I think great insights from you, Sanjay. And as we come towards the end, we've got our sort of last bit, what I call the 5 ones. I hope you're ready for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so one future trend or technology that excites you.
So I love building distributed systems. So what excites me is, this whole rich IoT devices coming in for everything. Advances in robotics, advances in AI, and how it's all going to stitch together. And if you think about it, it might do many, many sophisticated things. But one of the things it promises to do is we will not have to run errands anymore. Doing some grocery, paying a bill, walking the dog, if you also want to consider that an errand. Cooking, everything can be done because even what music to play, the algo will know what my mind mood is right now. I've had a heavy day, I had all these meetings, so it'll play something light automatically. I don't even have to decide, right? All decisions are made for me. So the prospects of building all this sounds pretty exciting, and not having to do a lot of errands is very exciting. However, the flip side to that, it's a double-edged sword, double-edged sword, and I think the flip side to that is life's going to become very boring. What are we going to do? I think it's going to take away I forget that Google Voice. If it's going to make restaurant reservation also, and also going to order because it knows what I like, what I ate yesterday, so I don't want to repeat it. Mexican, I haven't eaten in a long time. So, if everything's done, then it's going to take away fun of.
Where's the surprise?
Sorry?
The serendipity, the surprise.
It's gone, yeah. So that's the flip side of it, which I fear.
Okay, so I presume maybe that's also the tech trend that maybe disappoints you in some ways.
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. It's going to take away a lot of the human element, human relationships. So that's not something I look forward to that too.
Okay. Next question. So what's a one good book recommendation?
So I have it here. I think many of you would have read it.
Yes, Born to Run.
And then the other one that has really influenced me is Sapiens. Again, a very popular one. So not sure if I'm sharing anything new here.
Great. No, always helpful. One good person or podcast to follow?
So there's a guy called Rich Roll. I think his podcast is called richroll.com. He's a plant-based endurance athlete, but he runs a podcast which is about health, fitness, of course, about sports also. But he does a lot of very interesting podcasts around a variety of topics, even like parenting and spirituality, and also it's very, very interesting.
Great. And one key driving belief in your life?
I think it's all about relationships and it's all about people. And I think that's the most important thing to me in my life, and about helping people. So, yeah. Again, cliches, I've also realized that over the years that most of the learnings and are all cliched. So I think another great way is to just go over the list of cliches and maybe start taking them seriously.
Perfect. And before we end, I think one of the things I'd like to ask you is on your passion in ultra running. How did that come about, and how do you sort of practice it? I think because I know a lot of people are interested, but very few actually get started. So would love to hear your thoughts on that, how you got started and advice for people.
So actually, I got started just naturally because I was massively into football right from childhood. I think right from when I was 5 or 6, and then that kept growing. I played competitive at various levels, and then running is a great partner to football. And then that started, and somehow I realized that whenever I used to run on the road, I subconsciously would reach the footpath, and if there was even a spot of grass, I would sort of start running on that as opposed to that just came naturally. And then later it became more trail running, and then as it happens, a lot of trail races are very long, so then that becomes ultra running. And then a lot of the friends you make, they happen to be into triathlons also. And then by the time you reach your late 20s, and if you've been playing football or tennis or any of these sports, your knees can't take it anymore. So anyway, you take it to endurance sports. So it sort of happened naturally, and it's been a great pillar. I don't think I could have done, followed my profession and done such a job and entrepreneurship if I not had running or sports as a pillar. So I think for people who are interested, they should just start. 5K is good enough. Just make that a goal and just get started. The good thing in India is that now there's tons of clubs and encouragement. So I think it's not that hard to get started anymore.
Wonderful inputs, Sanjay. Thank you very much. It's been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here.
And friends, that was Sanjay Suri on this edition of Martech Brain. We'll be back with a new episode next week. Thank you very much.